Philemon. Yeah. Philemon, yeah.
Hey everybody, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and for the last few days, we have been considering the flags that have flown over our favorite town in the ancient world for the purposes of this season of the podcast, which is Colossae. That's the town we're rooting for. It's the little town that could, the town that made red wool and that tried real hard, but got overshadowed by its neighbors a lot. But in our hearts, it is number one, because the book of Colossians was written to it in the Bible, and the book of Philemon was written to it in the Bible. So we're learning all about it and how it works and where it came from and what all the different cultures were that came and went through there and what all the different flags were that flew over Colossae. So we spent a day and we talked about the super ancient flag. We don't really have a name for this one. It's just old, from like time immemorial to 1200-ish BC. Then we talked about the Phrygian flag, Phrygia, Phrygia. The Phrygian flag flew over Colossae from roughly 1200-ish BC to 676 BC. Famous kings like Gordius and Midas with the golden touch were in charge during this time. And then from 676 to 620 BC, we consider the third flag that flew over Colossae. This is the Cimmerian flag. We don't know a whole lot about these horse people from the steppes of Asia who were really good at conquering but not very good at ruling. But we know they were there from 676 BC to 620 BC, corresponding with the final golden years of the southern kingdom of Judah. Oh, I did learn something about the Cimmerians that I didn't know. Somebody over in the Patreon discussion, we do discussions for this podcast at patreon.com/the TMBH podcast. People also support the podcast there. Thank you, everybody who does that. But you don't have to, because the podcast is free, and you don't have to pay for a free podcast if you don't want to, though it is really nice and it does help. And thank you again to everybody who does it. But everybody's welcome over in the podcast discussion section on Patreon, and we do a new discussion thread for each week of the podcast, starting basically on Monday. I try to post a new one roughly on Mondays. And again, I mean, you can sign up for free and jump in and join in as a part of that conversation. Well, somebody over there told me that Conan the Barbarian was Cimmerian. What? I didn't remember that. Also, I wasn't allowed to watch that show when I was a kid because it had inappropriately clad women with swords, and it also had a lot of beheading and blood. But I had no idea where the Conan lore was set in history. I don't know anything about that stuff. Apparently, that was inspired by the Cimmerians. Thank you, Patreon commenter. That's helpful. Now I have a better context. Look at that. It goes both ways. This is awesome. So Cimmeria was the third flag that flew. They were horse people not good at governing, and then they got replaced by some people who were pretty dang good at governing, the Lydians. And their great king, who ruled from the great city of Sardis, was Croesus. Croesus intermarried with all of the mega powers of the ancient world, but in the end, he came out on the losing end of things. And the Lydians, as we discussed yesterday, got toppled by the Persians in roughly 540 BC. So Persia is the fifth flag to fly over Colossae. And the Persians held things down there for a couple hundred years. Those big famous invasions that you've heard of by Darius and his son Xerxes, where they went and fought all those legendary battles against the Greeks that you know about and you learned in school and that you've seen movies about, all of those attacks were staged from Sardis, just a stone's throw away from our favorite community of Colossae. Well, as you know by this point, Persia got toppled by a Macedonian kid named Alexander the Great. Most of Alexander's conquests were bloodless because he had such a big army of Macedonians and also Greek mercenaries. That is, he just rolled along like a slowly moving avalanche through all of Asia Minor. People were like, well, Persia's not here right now. And Alexander is here right now, and he has a sword, and it's incredibly pointy. So we're just going to go with you. now. You seem legit. So a lot of these places, including Colossae and Sardis, just bloodlessly bent the knee to Alexander the Great, which ends the 5th flag era of Colossae and begins the 6th flag era of Colossae, which is a tricky era to pin down. I'm calling this the Greek era, but the Greek era was not one thing. It was very tumultuous. Like when we talk about the Phrygian era, well, the whole time it's just Phrygia for like half a millennium. When we talk about the Lydian era, well, it's just Lydia for 100 years. But this Greek era that runs from the 330s BC to the 130s BC is absolutely bonkers. There's always wars. People are coming and going. If you remember a few weeks ago when we traced the history of the Jewish people from the Old Testament up to the time of Philemon. And remember, it was crazy, and it was war after war and invasion after invasion and rebellion. So much stuff happened in such a short period of time. Well, while that's going on in Judea, what's going on in Colossae and Asia Minor is this era of the 6th flag over Colossae. Alexander the Great, I don't think he ever actually passed through Colossae. He walked a great big horseshoe all the way around it. He started up around Byzantium, down by Ephesus and all of that stuff, and then he doubled back up and looped right around Colossae. I mean, talk about being in flyover territory. What a bummer for them. They didn't even get to meet Alexander the Great. And then Alexander famously went back up north to the ancient Phrygian capital when that flag flew over Colossae, and he cut the Gordian knot, fulfilling the ancient prophecy of the Phrygians, of the one who would come to conquer the world, or whatever the heck that prophecy was. And he went down to, if you can picture the Mediterranean Sea and you just think of it as like a rectangle, simplify the Mediterranean Sea in your brain right now to the simplest rectangle shape you can make. How many of you just used fingers with both hands to create a rectangle in front of your face? Did you do it? Because I'm doing it. Now picture the upper right-hand corner of that overly simplified rectangle. That is where the next great big battle of Alexander happened after he liberated, I'm making little bunny air quotes for the word liberated, after he liberated Colossae and replaced their old Persian flag with his new Alexandrian flag. That battle in the upper right corner of the rectangle is called the Battle of Issus. That happened in 333 BC. Alexander obviously won. Then he went on and bloodlessly liberated, I'm making air quotes again, Jerusalem. And then he went down and he established Alexandria and gained submission from Egypt. Then Alexander turned his attention eastward, pursuing Darius III. Darius III got killed. Alexander names himself the last of the Achaemenid emperors of Persia, and so on and so forth out east. Well, you know the story. Alexander dies. He doesn't name an heir. He's got a kid on the way, but nobody knows if it's going to be a boy, and it's going to be forever before he could reign. There's a limp attempt at having sort of a steward run things for a while until we can figure out what's going on here, guys. But all of these generals who were with Alexander, they've conquered the world. They don't care about your stupid paperwork. They're used to conquering. They're going to do more conquering. They fight. They divide up the ancient world. As you know, we call this the era of the Diadochi. This is the late 300s BC. And some of these historic lines get drawn pretty firmly and last for a long time. Like we're talking like as long as the United States has been around. That's pretty legit. Like the Ptolemies in Egypt. That's pretty solid. The Antigonid Empire in Old Macedonia. That's pretty solid. But Asia Minor is a constant battlefield. Asia Minor meaning modern-day Turkey. So that's why I say it's kind of murky when we talk about murky Turkey. That was cute. It rhymed. I like that. I'm keeping that. That's why I say it's kind of weird and murky and hard to nail down exactly what's going on in these 200 years that are the 6th flag over Colossae, because there's constant fighting and it's constantly changing. There are no fewer than 3 different descendants of Alexander's generals who at one time or another own Colossae and Sardis and this little neighborhood that we're zoomed in on for this conversation. Eventually, just as is the case with the Jewish people, the Seleucids end up in charge. And a guy named Antiochus I, this is the same Antiochus for whom Antioch is named. Antioch is, of course, in the Bible. That's the church that sends Paul out to go on his missionary journeys. Antioch is the first place that the Christians were called Christians. There's more than one Antioch. There's another one called Pisidian Antioch that came up a lot in our last season. That's in Central Asia Minor in the province of Galatia. I mean, this is a big name. You're starting to recognize it by now. There are towns in the United States called Antioch. In fact, in anticipation of this conversation, I went and looked because I was curious, and it turns out that some of you in Antioch, Illinois, Antioch, Tennessee, and Antioch, California listen to or have listened to this program. So that's kind of cool. It's a big name that casts a long shadow is the point. And Antiochus I, who reigned from 281 to 261 BC, and his son Antiochus II, who reigned from 261 to 253 BC, they're like, you know what we need to do now that we've conquered old Phrygia and old Lydia? We need to make some towns that are really Greekish, in very logical places that can kind of start fresh, have Greek values. Let's get rid of the old Phrygian language, particularly the old Lydian language. Let's get rid of the old Persian trade language, Aramaic, which is the language that Jesus mostly spoke and taught in. We're going to get rid of all of that, and we're going to replace it with Greek in a couple of new towns that are going to be great for trade and commerce and travel. And so these two Antiochuses found a couple of towns right next door to Colossae during this sixth flag over Colossae era. And now I'm going to do the abrupt pause thing because this sixth flag era over Colossae, it's multifaceted. There's a lot going on here. And it more directly pertains to how things are in the book of Philemon and the world of Philemon than the previous several flags combined. So we're going to take a little more time on it. We're going to fill in the gaps here. You're going to start to see the payoff take shape. So I'm very excited for that over the next couple of days. All right, more on this sixth flag, the Greek-ish era over Colossae, next time around. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.
Hey, Matt's daughter here. I just wanted to jump in really quick and say thank you to everyone who supports the program. It means a lot.